Welcome to United Way for Greater Austin's Census Ambassador Training, a training to learn the basics of the 2020 census and how to promote participation. My name is Mariana Salazar, and I am coordinating and promoting census participation in Central Texas in the counties of Caldwell, Bastrop, Hays, Travis, and Williamson. Please feel free to reach out to me by email or cell phone. I'm here as a resource for everyone. I'm excited to be sharing with you over the next 15 minutes or so why the census is so important, why it's easy and safe to respond, what are the challenges that our region faces when it comes to making sure everyone participates, and ways that we can all promote census participation. Let me share some census basics before going into more details. The census is a short questionnaire to count how many of us live in the country and to know where we live, and it happens every 10 years. It's important because when we respond, we help bring more federal dollars and political power to our communities, and when we don't respond, we miss out on dollars and representation. We can complete the census from March 12th all the way through October 31st, and everyone, absolutely everyone, can and should participate in the census. We can respond online, by phone, and by mail. And if things get better with the pandemic and you haven't responded yet before the deadline, a census worker may visit you by knocking on your door to help you complete the census. Let me go deeper into why the census is so important. 55 federal programs tie their dollars to the census count, and the numbers from the 2020 census will be used every year for the next 10 years until 2030 to distribute funds across the states according to the number of persons counted. In Texas alone, $60 billion federal dollars are distributed annually, and you can see that the types of programs being funded are vital for our communities, like Medicare and Medicaid, school meals, and housing vouchers. Another reason why the census is so important is because the 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives are divided among our states according to each one of our populations. So when we're all counted, we get fair representation, but when we're not, we get less representatives for our state. What you see here is a map of the U.S. with the states that are expected to gain or lose seats based on the projected population growth. And those expected to gain seats have green circles, while those expected to lose have red circles. Given that Texas has been experiencing the biggest increase in population in the whole US, we're expected to gain the most number of seats. We currently have 36, and if we're all counted, we would gain 3 extra seats, bringing us to 39 representatives. As you can see, we in Texas stand to lose the most if all of us are not counted. There are 3 main ways to respond to the census. The first one is to go online to my2020census.gov and complete it there either on your computer, tablet, or phone. The second one is to call any of the 14 language lines listed in this slide, and they're available every day from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. And the third one is to mail a form. Depending on the zip code you live in, you may have already received a printed form, and if that's the case and that's your preferred method, you can go ahead and mail it in. If you haven't received one and you haven't responded yet, you should receive a paper copy in April, and then you can mail it in. The census asks 10 questions. The first one is your first and last name, then your telephone number, and that's in case the Census Bureau needs to contact you for any follow-up questions. The number of people living or staying at your address, and that's regardless of whether they're related to you or not. Whether you own or rent, your sex, your date of birth and age, whether you're of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin, your race, the relationship to everyone living in the household, and whether anyone usually lives or stays somewhere else. This last question is to make sure that people are not counted twice. Please note that the census will not ask you about your immigration or citizenship status. They also will not ask you your social security number nor any bank or financial information. If anyone claiming to be from the Census Bureau asks these questions, please know it is fraud and you should not share such information. You can call the number 800-923-8282 to report census fraud. With the pandemic, the Census Bureau has been updating its operations and guidance. In particular, things have changed for students. As of March 21st, the Census Bureau asked for students that normally live in a dorm or college-owned Greek housing to not complete the census, given the Census Bureau is working directly with their universities to count them. So they themselves don't have to respond to the census, and their parents should not include them on their responses either. On the other hand, if the students lived in an off-campus apartment or house and went home because of COVID-19, they should respond to the census, and they should use the address where they would have lived if they had not gone back home. This is the tricky part. So in other words, they should not be included on their parents' responses either, and they themselves have to complete the census with their old address. For more guidance, you can go to this link and watch this video. Up to now, I have been talking about the importance of the census and how easy it is to respond. Let me now talk about why it's safe to complete the census. I know that some people may mistrust the government, and I want to share with you why responding to the census is safe. First of all, the Census Bureau is not a law enforcement agency. It's a statistical agency that only collects information for statistical purposes. Second, your personal information is protected by law. The Census Bureau is prohibited from sharing individual data with the police, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, landlords, or public benefit providers. And third, census workers who break the confidentiality law have to either pay a $250,000 fine or go to jail for 5 years. So those are big deterrents from anyone who may want to breach the confidentiality protections. For persons with undocumented or non-citizenship status, I want to share that the 2020 census does not ask about our citizenship or immigration status. The information we provide is completely private and confidential, and the Census Bureau is not allowed to share our individual information with local, state, or federal agencies for the purpose of immigration law enforcement. As an immigrant myself, I know many of our communities live in the shadows, and the census is an important opportunity to stand up for our communities, to participate in our democracy, and to count even if some of us can't vote. We all stand to lose more by not being counted, by, for example, missing out on much needed funds for our schools, hospitals, and public libraries, and now to recover from this pandemic. Let's now go over some of the challenges that we face to a complete 2020 census count. We face a number of challenges when it comes to making sure everyone is counted in the 2020 census. Historically, some populations have been undercounted, and those include minorities, immigrants, low-income populations, and children under 5. In the 2010 census, for example, 16 million people were undercounted, including minorities and young children. United Way for Greater Austin has partnered with local foundations and has granted over $400,000 to nonprofits in Central Texas to make sure everyone is counted in our region. Our partners are working together to address things that may prevent people from participating in the census, including distrust of government, lack of access to internet, and now the challenges posed by the pandemic. Let me show you some numbers and will then walk you through some outreach strategies we are implementing to promote census participation. Roughly about 2 million people live in Central Texas, and what you see here are estimates of the populations that are at risk of an undercount in this 2020 census. Ethnic minorities make up about 1 million of the region. Families living in poverty about 500,000, but of course, given the crisis we're living now, sadly this number is probably much larger. Immigrants make up about 300,000 people, young children about 130,000, and persons with no internet access about 80,000. The student populations, as well as persons experiencing homelessness, have also been historically undercounted and are important populations to include in our census outreach. Let's now go over ways we can all promote census participation. There are things we can all be doing to promote census participation. If you haven't responded yet, please respond to the census as soon as possible. By responding early, you allowed outreach resources to go to where they're needed the most, because we know that people that can't respond without any issues have already done so. Please share this video with others so they can also learn the basics of the census and become census ambassadors. Something else you can be doing is calling your friends who are at least likely to have self-responded yet and answer any questions they may have. You can share the my2020census.gov link or the phone numbers they can call to respond by phone. You can also engage your friends by promoting census participation in your social media, and you can volunteer with your local Complete Count committee, and I'll tell you more about it on the next slide. The Complete Count committees are volunteer committees established by community leaders and organizations to increase awareness and motivate residents to respond to the 2020 census. Here are the main Complete Count committees in our Central Texas region, and if you want to volunteer, this is a great place to start. Depending on where you live and where you want to participate, you can reach out to any of the CCCs and find out opportunities to volunteer. In Travis County, the CCC has many additional subcommittees, including the Latinx, the African American, Asian American, and LGBTQ CCCs. Let me share with you our outreach framework. We are lucky to be working in an age where we have access to a lot of data, and that data should guide our outreach efforts. If we combine targeted outreach and we share information about completing the census through trusted voices and a high-touch approach, we can make a difference, empowering persons who would have not participated on their own to actually respond to the census. There are two important maps that track self-response rates in different areas. One is from the Census Bureau, and the second one is from the City University of New York. In the map you see in this slide, the areas in orange, and in particular darker orange, are the areas where the self-response rates are lower, while the areas with the blue colors are the areas with the higher self-response rates. These maps are updated daily, and it's critical that we keep a close watch on them, prioritizing outreach in areas that are lagging behind, colored with darker orange. There are a lot of remote and safe outreach strategies that we can be implementing even during this pandemic. We can be doing phone banks and text banks, and if we know an area is not performing well in terms of its census self-response, then we should be reaching out to residents in that area, including leaders of churches and community organizations, to incorporate them into our outreach efforts targeted for that specific area. We can also be distributing census flyers through the food distribution that's happening right now for families and seniors. Other things that we can be doing include sending mailers and setting up yard signs in strategic locations like grocery stores or pharmacies. Keep in mind, though, that having a conversation over the phone and answering questions about the census will be much more effective at getting people to respond to the census than, let's say, having a yard sign placed somewhere or sending a mailer. In terms of digital organizing, there are a lot of opportunities we can utilize to engage people at the individual level, and I think we can be particularly effective if we engage people with whom we already have relationships and build from those networks. Example of digital activities we can be doing include Facebook or Instagram live events or Twitter storms. Nextdoor is a social media app for neighborhoods that can also be very effective when it comes to reaching out to specific neighborhoods and mobilizing volunteers, digital volunteers. You can learn more about how to implement digital organizing strategies by visiting the link on this slide. It's from the Census Count campaign, and they have been doing a very effective job at building different tools for us that are promoting census participation. And last but not least, we can all be writing op-eds and reaching out to the media to cover any of our census digital events. Let me share with you a couple more outreach strategies. One way we can incentivize census participation is by doing a drawing where you give away prizes to persons who submit their census completion confirmation numbers. I know that some communities have been using this strategy, giving away HEB cards, and it has worked quite well in terms of incentivizing people to submit their numbers and complete their census. Another strategy, if you're an employer, is to designate a company-wide time for everyone to complete the questionnaire. And depending on the employer, the employee could also tie it to an incentive as well. And one last way is to coordinate with school districts so they include statistics in school as part of their homeschooling lesson plans. Statistics in School is an interactive curriculum that was designed by the Census Bureau with material from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. If you are an organization that wants to do more to promote census participation, my suggestion is to first start by monitoring and using the self-response maps that I talked about earlier. Those will help you guide where your efforts should be targeted. Second, I would suggest coordinating and contacting your local CCC. I've included contact information for them as well, because it's really important that you don't duplicate efforts. And third, I would say you come up and develop your own plan of implementing the different strategies that we talked about. At United Way, we have created a census resource hub. It's called Mission Box. It's on a Mission Box page. And there are plenty of resources there that I would urge you to visit first before creating anything of your own. We have media contacts that you can reach out to in our region. There's a social media guide with ready-to-use social media posts that you can adapt for your needs. We have a library of PSAs and videos that include both Census Bureau videos and videos that have been created locally by different CCCs and different groups. And there's a phone banking script and even more. So I urge you to first start here and then build from what we have already been building over the past 5 months. And last but not least, I want to tell you about 211. 211 is a social service phone line answered by local staff and is available 24/7 in all of Central Texas. Staff speak English and Spanish, and they can access a service language line with interpreters that speak over 200 languages. 211 staff can answer questions related to COVID-19, community resources available to meet basic needs, and any census-related questions. They also have the ability to connect callers to the Census Bureau lines, where callers can directly respond to the census. I want to thank all our partners who are funding this important work. We would not be able to do it without your generous contributions. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share how we can all be part of the solution of promoting a complete count in Central Texas. I know we're living in tough times, and I appreciate you caring about census participation. Feel free to reach out to me with census questions. I'm here to help.